Before we get started, I'd just like to say this podcast is brought to you in part by the Nate Hate Show. Go check out the Nate Hate Show on YouTube. They post every Saturday at noon Eastern Time. Nate Hate Show. The link is in the description and on screen. All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our post-Senior Bowl 7-round mock draft for the quarterbacks only. We're going to be projecting where all 9 quarterback selections go in the upcoming NFL draft. We'll probably do this a handful of times, but Senior Bowl and East-West Shrine Bowl just wrapped up. And, lots happened over the past couple of weeks, Nick, in this offseason, so I think this is going to be a very accurate assessment of how we're feeling compared to a couple of months ago. Looking at number 2 overall, the Houston Texans, one thing we do is we do not project trades. So we do anticipate Chicago. Right now they have the number 1 overall pick, so that's how we're going to move forward. So looking at number 2, Bryce Young from Alabama. Pretty easy selection here, Nick. I think the Texans will love to trade up to guarantee this pick. But this guy is phenomenal. Calm in the pocket, elite accuracy. The ball placement in the middle of the field is just phenomenal. His feet in the pocket are just exceptional. I love watching this guy play, especially this past year where he really had to carry that offense. There's a big difference between the Alabama offense this year, and I want to use Clemson's offense last year as an example, a team that really lacked chemistry from their passing attack. That was one thing Alabama, I would say, lacked this past year. But there's a big difference in productivity and playmaking from that, and that's probably because Bryce Young is that good of a player. Outside of being undersized, not having exactly the strongest of arms. The former Heisman Trophy winner, Nick, is going to be the number 1 quarterback taken overall. Wouldn't be shocked if C.J. Stroud gets the nod over him, but I think Bryce has got that locked up. And his role is going to be very simple. He's going to be a day 1 starter, and they hope he's going to be the franchise quarterback, a team that really needs a lot of help in a lot of areas. This is a good way to get things started on the 2023 draft.
I think Bryce Young has to be the number 1 quarterback taken in this draft. Certainly could climb up to number 1 overall depending on how the trades go. We don't speculate on that. So right now we have him at 2, Houston Texans. I think this makes a whole lot of sense. D'Amico Ryans, former Alabama alum, just took the job. John Mechie, his former wide receiver at Alabama, is also on the Texans team, right? So a little continuity there. Calm in the pocket. I love the way he was able to, escape a lot of these, big edge rushers earlier this year. He made a lot of great plays for himself. I feel like when your biggest knock is you're a bit undersized, and really, I don't think the size is as big of an issue as some people make it out to be. I think it certainly is something to note. When you look at the measurements, about 6 foot 195. What PFF has him at, could be, give or take on the weight there. But I think, the size is not the biggest issue in the world. The arm strength, I think it's still really, really solid. The movement, good, good, calm in the pocket, great field management, good way, good vision on the field as well. Good playmaker, clutch, of course, in certain situations. I think this is a great pick for the Texans here. I think he's a quarterback that has the best potential to be a long-term starter in this draft. He's a really talented quarterback, and he has a great future ahead of him. I think the Texans will get a star quarterback to kind of start to rebuild their franchise, which really has been a disaster the last few years.
The zip he possesses to all levels of the field, I think, certainly outweighs, not having a strong arm that can bolt at 80 yards. And he's a very instinctive passer as well. And no, the size isn't exactly impressive. 6 foot 200 is what I got marked down. But I think if he was, 5 inches taller, he wouldn't have the escapability that he certainly has. There's plenty of times this past year where he was able to make great plays, being a little bit shorter while also having that phenomenal feel in the pocket. Do you think that's an accurate assessment, Nick? Because I remember games like against LSU where he showed that clutch gene, the Texas one as well. This guy was very poised, and, his escapability was a big reason why Alabama was able to stay in some of these games. They played a lot of close ones this past year, and just top to bottom, this is a phenomenal prospect. But would you agree with that assessment?
I agree. I think his size certainly makes him a little more nimble than some quarterbacks that have come out in recent years. I think, if he was a bit, let's say 5 inches taller and, 25 pounds heavier, I think it'd be tough kind of make the moves in the pocket. We definitely saw it in Texas. He made that incredible escape, that highlight play on that last drive to set up the game-winning field goal for Will Reichard. We saw it against LSU where he ducked and dove all around the pocket, able to give Alabama a few points there and force the game to go to overtime when they really were looking like they were in trouble all night in Death Valley. So I think that's a very fair assessment. I think the size, again, not perfect, but I really think it's not the biggest knock in the world at this point in time.
Next up, 4th overall, the Indianapolis Colts. We have them also snagging a quarterback in C.J. Stroud, 2 AFC South teams that are really needy at this position. Add 2 great ones. Coming into the year, you said Bryce and C.J. were 1A and 1B in our rankings, and I don't think much has changed coming into this draft. I've always been a big fan of C.J. Stroud. 2 years ago, nobody knew who he was, and I picked him to win the Heisman Trophy in 2021, and people were like, you're out of your mind. And, well, he ended up on the podium and probably would have won that trophy if his defense was able to show up a little bit more and punch a ticket to Indy for the Big 12 title game. Some of the positives on him, though, he also has a great feel in the pocket. He's not as escapable as Bryce Young. That's why I put, one of his negatives is he doesn't always showcase that mobility. I picked him to beat Georgia because I thought Stroud would be dialed in and that receiving core would just tear them up. but I didn't expect him to be this dialed in, Nick. He really showcased his mobility, was making defenders miss out of the pocket, throwing touchdowns on the run. That we had never seen that from C.J. Stroud. We did not see the leadership like we did that night. I know that really hurt him in that loss because he was so focused. And, that game meant a lot to him because, he was certainly hearing the noise from the fan base. He did not beat Michigan in his 2 years there. This is a guy that has elite zip and placement, though. His ability to evade pressure. I think it's a positive because we did see it in that Georgia game, but he just needs to showcase it on a more consistent basis. Great downfield precision, a very strong arm. He can throw from the other hash, a lot of corner routes, a lot of spacing from those pass catchers at Ohio State. I think timing is a big part of that scheme. I do think it's a bit of a negative. The scheme is certainly one that you have to be a very talented quarterback to execute, but when you have those tangibles, you can certainly run it to a T, and the talent at Ohio State was also another premium. So this is another guy that's going to come in and be a day one starter with the hopes of being a franchise quarterback. How do you feel about my assessment of C.J. Stroud?
I think it's a very fair assessment. I also switched my pick to Ohio State over Georgia about 5 days before the game because I started to watch some of the film on C.J. Stroud, and I felt a little more comfortable taking that pick. I thought he had a great chance with those wide receivers to pick apart what I thought was, at the time, a weak-ish Georgia secondary. And it certainly looked like that for the first, 90% of that game. They really were having their way with that secondary, making great plays. I like C.J. Stroud here a lot. I think great feel in the pocket, high football IQ, great field visibility, strong arm as well. Certainly, you have to be cautious of Ohio State quarterbacks. We've seen in the past several Ohio State quarterbacks have busted out the NFL very quickly. The scheme doesn't kind of translate that well to the NFL. I think it's definitely is something to be cautious of when drafting a quarterback from Ohio State. I think it's certainly something to take into consideration. I think Stroud has enough talent to make up for that kind of gap. Second and third in school history, single season passing yards, touchdowns. That Rose Bowl game was absolutely fantastic. Well, from him, very talented player, good down the field, good vision, like I said, ability to evade pursuit if necessary. He's a very talented quarterback, a star in the NFL in the making. I think he's got a lot of potential here to develop very quickly. The size is fantastic, 6'3", 215, right where you want to be, in my opinion. I think that's the perfect size for a quarterback at this day and age. I think this is a great pick here for Indianapolis that has really struggled to find a quarterback since Andrew Luck retired.
Yeah, they went for a lot of veterans. I think this is time they finally gamble on a young guy. Stroud, rarely off target, great accuracy. So even though you might be right, a bit of a scheme change might be a little shaky for him in the beginning, he certainly has all the characteristics to make up for it. Now we're going to have a little bit of fun because the top two quarterbacks are kind of a given. Number 9 overall, I had Will Levis going to the Panthers. Obviously Frank Wright, I think this is certainly a project player that he's going to probably want to gamble on. This is a guy that has a fast release, a complete cannon for an arm, some great downfield accuracy. He's got good mobility for his size. This is a bigger guy that people are probably aware of at 6'3", 232. Some of the negatives, though, Nick, he needs to learn to take some zip off the ball. This guy's throwing 100-mile-per-hour fastballs. He looks like Clayton Kershaw out there when he's throwing a slant route or, a simple dig. It's kind of ridiculous. So control needs to be learned. Mechanics need some work. Progression under pressure is a big, question mark. And he fails to deliver in big moments. The Ole Miss game, they had opportunity to win that one late. He ends up fumbling, gets completely blasted against Tennessee. But they lose by 30, 40 points. He had 3 picks. I think he had 98 yards passing. Disaster of a day. And then against Georgia at home, one of his interceptions was just a complete underthrow. He got baited by Keely Ringo in that one. There's plenty of other ones you can go dial up of him just not showing up in big moments. This is not a guy that has a great highlight reel by any means, especially in those big games, Nick. I seen a quote a few days ago that said not a single NFL draft scout believes this is a good quarterback one bit, and they were not happy that he did not play in one of the all-star games that took place, over the last weekend or two. This is a guy that wasn't an All-American on the academic team this past year. This is a project player with hopes of being a high-level starter in year 2. Matt Corral, of course, is still on the Panthers roster, as is Sam Darnold, but I think Frank Wright will gamble on this. How do you feel about Will Levis? Because the positives are certainly there, but the negatives certainly outweigh them by a ton.
Yeah, Will Levis is certainly a boomer bust prospect here, right? This is potential to be a long-term 10-year starting NFL or a guy that busts out in less than a year, right? It's a complete gamble here, an absolute crapshoot. The tape is not good. Totally a knock on Will Levis for not participating in the Senior Bowl or another All-Star Bowl. He really should have gone to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, in my opinion. Just a missed opportunity there from his camp. Not really entirely sure what their kind of thought process on that was. 6'3", 232, bigger guy. The arm strength is great, right? Can have an arm, good downfield accuracy, but puts a little too much speed on it. The field vision's poor. Struggles, gets happy feet under pressure. Kind of just makes a bad read here and there and a bad pick. Did not have the season we were hoping for. You and I were both pretty high on him in the preseason. I think I would say that you and I were cautiously optimistic on him. I think a lot of people had really high expectations. You and I kind of tapered them back a little bit in the preseason. and he failed to even meet those expectations, right? Did not have a great campaign. The stats were not fantastic. This one's one that I go to back and forth on, right? I think this is like I said, boomer bust prospect. This has great potential for someone that could, land themselves a really great value quarterback, or this could be a total bust and one of the worst draft picks in the last 10 years. I think this is a crazy gamble for whoever takes it. And I feel like the Panthers at this point, they seem like the team that has the best chance to do that. They have a lot to gain from this and a lot to lose from this.
Yeah, I can tell you exactly what the Levis camp was thinking. I think they're aware that this guy might play himself out of a high draft position. I think that's exactly what it is. Would you agree with that, Nick? Because I think that's probably what most people are assuming, is that they did not want him to disappoint, like a lot of guys in Mobile did this past weekend.
You might be right with that comment. That would be it's kind of a tough way to look at a very negative attitude, but I think I agree with you. He could have harmed himself more than he helped himself, certainly.
Now, looking at one that I certainly was not exactly on par with was Anthony Richardson. Nick, you have him going to the Commanders. And the reason I don't think this makes a lot of sense is because this roster really isn't too bad. And Tyler Heineke's obviously not elite. He's not a franchise guy, but he's a heck of a game manager. I'd say an above-average game manager. I'm a big fan of his. He would certainly thrive in a role maybe in like Tampa Bay if their offensive line was healthy, or Philadelphia, for example. That's the most perfect situation, I would say, for a quarterback like him. But that's not what he's in right now. In Washington, they gambled on Carson Wentz, didn't work out. And I would rather see them, trade a handful of picks away, including this one, to move up and get one of those guys in the top 2 instead of sitting here and drafting Anthony Richardson. I told you if they did this, I would give it a C+, because this is a guy that's obviously an elite runner in the open field, makes his best plays out of the pocket, impressive arm talent. He can really rip it now. He's got a big arm, a nice spiral, even when he's on the run. But some of the negatives are just awful. Plenty of overthrows, a lot of arm throws. He doesn't always use a proper base. And his turnovers are some of the worst we've seen. We talked about that coming into the year, about how he gave the game against Georgia away back in 2021. Same with LSU. And what's he do, Nick? In week 2, he throws a horrible interception against Kentucky right to one of the linebackers or DNs for a pick 6. And also later in that game, they're down by a score. It's about 4th and 6. His receiver, he wins at the sticks. He's wide open. And he throws it behind his pass catcher. That's a massive play in that game that costed him the game in the end. And then the next week, what's he do? They're trailing against USF. He leads them on a drive, and he throws a pick at the goal line. They ended up surviving in that one. And he didn't, turn it over too much more after that. 5 of his interceptions, 5 of the 9 picks he had on the year came in the month of September. So he certainly tailored it down a little bit towards the back half of the year. But his turnovers are still awful, Nick. This is a high upside player, though. With hard work, he can, I think, have a Lamar Jackson type impact. I think maybe he can be a contributor in year 3. And I'm not really sure what the difference is between Anthony Richardson and, say, Malik Willis. What is it? Because I can't find it, and you're clearly thinking the Commanders should gamble on him here at 16 overall.
The way I look at this, I think the Washington Commanders are going to trade out of this pick, but as we do not mock trades in our current mock drafts, I have to have them picking somebody at 16. I think their roster is very well constructed. They don't really have a lot of needs, in my opinion. They're in the right position. So I can see them taking a gamble on a guy like Anthony Richardson. I think there's a lot of upside here, right? Lamar Jackson, Robert Griffin III type of player, right? I think he has elite runner in open field, very talented, solidly makes plays out of the pocket, right? I think it's someone that you can kind of grow and kind of get that arm talent to be better and get that accuracy and decision making up, right? This is a guy that's not going to start day 1, right? He's going to have some time to kind of work on the field, on the practice field, sit around the system, and kind of more of a long-term option here. Is 16 high for a long-term option? Yeah, absolutely. But I think this is someone that is really talented, and I think he has a better chance to succeed in the NFL than Will Levis does at this point. I think that he's going to be one of those quarterbacks that, as long as you just practice, you fine-tune those mechanics, get the decision-making a little bit better, work on the passing overall, I think he's going to have potential to be a star quarterback in this league. I like the running ability. We've seen it with Lamar Jackson. We've seen it with other quarterbacks in the past. You can certainly make, Jalen Hurts, you can certainly make a star quarterback of someone that's running focused first with good coaching and good practice and a couple of years to get comfortable in the system.
Pretty bold take there. I love the analysis. We're going to move to the second round now. 38 overall, Las Vegas Raiders, Tanner McKee. This is the most quiet guy in this draft process. Not a single person has said his name, which is going to be a mistake. And the biggest reason why is because he won 6 games. I think he had 16 losses in 2 years as a starter at Stanford. Not his fault. If you watch Stanford football, you know exactly what I'm talking about. 6'6", 230. That size is great. Good anticipation. I really like his feet. Some good accuracy and strength at all levels of the field. Steps up in the pocket. He really trusts his protection as well. And, I thought he had some impressive speed for that size as well. This is a guy that was a former 5-star recruit, took a 2-year mission trip, so he was late on campus. Still a pretty young guy. I believe he's 20 years old. The touch is inconsistent, though. The mental processing isn't exactly up to speed. He doesn't always scan the field. And he has an odd sidearm-like release. And he had a pretty talented receiving core, I thought, at Stanford. A couple of guys that ended up in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. This is a guy I think that he's, want to look at Will Levis and compare him to Tanner McKee, who would probably be better. I think that's one thing that a lot of scouts might be asking themselves. And, I think the Raiders, Derek Carr, again, we don't make assumptions, but one thing for certain is Derek Carr is not coming back. So he's going to battle with Jarrett Stidham for the starting job. Josh McDaniels will have a crucial role in his development. But I think this is a guy that's probably one of the better quarterbacks in this class that does not get enough love, which makes a lot of sense, Nick. But I think this is a very underrated prospect. He's got a lot of very good tools, and of course, that size that I think makes him very desirable.
I like Tanner McKee a whole lot. The accuracy is fantastic. Probably the most accurate quarterback in this class. I love the accuracy. The arm strength, good. The size is perfect. The good feet as well. Yes, he played on a bad team, right? And that certainly is something you can take into consideration. But I think it shouldn't paint the full picture, right? Good accuracy, anticipation, solid in the pocket. The football IQ certainly needs some work, and this is a guy that I think he has potential to kind of develop. I think Vegas is a perfect spot for him because, like you said, battle out with Stidham, kind of be developed by Josh McDaniels, who has a history of working with solid quarterbacks. I think this would be a great pick for Vegas. I think someone's going to get a really good player here in the second round. If people are sleeping on this guy, I think he'll rise a little bit more as we get to the combine. We maybe get some combine stats out of him. I think he's a very talented quarterback. I'm excited to see what he can do. I think he gets a knock because he played in a bad system at a bad school. It's really not that great, but he's a talented quarterback, and we've seen Stanford produce all-star quarterbacks in the past with Andrew Luck, so I certainly think there's another one in the pipeline here with Tanner McKee.
And the Raiders have a pretty talented supporting cast. McDaniels, a lot of people have varying opinions on him, but when he's at his best, he's certainly a guy that can really develop these quarterbacks. And Derek Carr, again, this is a big gamble with them leaving, with them allowing him to go elsewhere. So I think, why not take the gamble on a guy that's going to be, a high upside player. 83rd overall, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jake Haener, Nick, you have him ending up in Tampa Bay. I'm a big fan of Jake Haener. This is a guy that I've always been a massive fan of, mainly because he's an ultimate competitor. I'm about to read off a couple of traits, including that not many other guys on this list will have. And that includes being a phenomenal leader. He's also tough as nails, incredibly clutch. I don't know if you've seen this guy. He plays on the West Coast, so probably not. But this guy will be making plays at midnight, 1 a.m. to just blow your mind. His pocket awareness is phenomenal. The intermediate accuracy. I think he's a pretty good processor as well, which is always a big thing when it comes to going to the NFL. And I say he has a strong arm. Some scouting reports say he doesn't, but I seen a clip the other day of him launching that thing 60 yards in the air. Now, this guy doesn't always carry the velocity downfield, so maybe that's what they're getting that from. Not much of a threat as a runner. That's certainly something that's important. And no trait of his outside of, leadership and toughness and being a competitor is exactly elite. And this guy wasn't exactly a stout vertical passer, which I think that's where a lot of these people are coming from when they talk about him not having a great arm, Nick, because the zip is not phenomenal, and him not being a great vertical thrower on tape. The arm strength just doesn't seem consistent exactly, but I think this is a guy, especially if you go into Tampa Bay, where you have to beat out, Blaine Gabbert and Kyle Trask. There's a legit opportunity for him to come in here and win this competition because he loves to compete, and I think that's one thing he can do here in Tampa Bay. This makes sense. This is a guy I think will be a day one backup, and, I think if he makes the most of his opportunity, he could be a phenomenal starter.
Yeah, I think this is a solid quarterback. I was really impressed with the Senior Bowl. That's why I kind of started to move up on my list, right? Senior Bowl MVP, looked really good in practice, looked great in the game, obviously won MVP, was the best quarterback in Mobile by far. Tough competitor, tough as nails, clutch in the pocket. I think the arm strength is also underrated. I agree with you on that take. Certainly you look at the competition in the Mountain West, maybe that's something being considered here, right? And I think he's a talented quarterback. I like the size on him. I think he's a solid guy. I think he's got a good backup potential. He's definitely got a future in the NFL for me. 6'1", 200 pounds. I think it's solid, right? I think it's a good guy. He was pretty mobile and mobile as well. He moved around the pocket a little bit. He made some plays when he needed to. I liked the tape in practice. I think this guy's very exciting. He's not really a threat as a runner, but I saw him make some moves. He's got some good feet in the pocket. He's willing to make a move if he needs to. I think this is a great pick for Tampa Bay, right? Obviously, Tom Brady retiring has created a sort of new need for quarterback in Tampa Bay. I think this, late here in the third round, this is a good opportunity to kind of grab a player that could have really high potential for you.
And one of those things you can't teach, again, is being great in those high-pressure situations. He does have some pretty quick feet, and he has great touch on the move. He's not really going to do much as a runner, but, if he's out of the pocket, there's a guy there that has a little bit of space, he'll put it on him. Next up, the Giants, a few picks later, Hendon Hooker from Tennessee. I think Brian Dable and Hooker would be just a phenomenal pairing. Every year we all have our mock drafts, and we just continue to pick the same guy, the same team. And I think Hooker to the Giants will be what I'll be doing this year. This is a guy that rarely puts the ball in harm's way. His maturity is obviously phenomenal. Obviously, a lot of people talk about him and Stetson Bennett being 25, 24, however old they are. This is a guy that also has a compact release. He's a runner that falls forward. good downfield velocity. Some of the negatives, though, he struggles to extend plays. But, of course, this system he was playing in at Tennessee certainly limits the off-scheduled plays that, occur for Tennessee's offense. I feel like he can be an improviser and learn a pro offense, but those are still pretty big question marks. He's also coming off a torn ACL. Hendon Hooker, I don't have as many notes on because, again, this system is very friendly to what his skill set was able to provide, with that, good touch and the compact release. But this is a guy that really flicked it downfield with good velocity, a lot of confidence, and, again, only a handful of picks over the last 2 years. I love his short yardage timing and accuracy. His mechanics, I think, need a little bit of work. The biggest question mark, again, though, Nick, is can he learn a pro-style offense and adjust from Tennessee to a team maybe like the Giants?
Yeah, I think this is an exciting pick as a Giants fan. I do like this pick. I think Hendon Hooker is a really talented quarterback. Of course, the injury is certainly a concern here, right? Recovery from an ACL tear, that is a very tough injury to recover to. Will he be the same player he was pre-injury? Only time will tell, and I certainly think that this is why he's in the 3rd round, right? He should be a higher draft pick, but the injury certainly does that, right? Doesn't have a lot of turnovers, protects the ball, great maturity, good runner too, right? Good downfield. I like the speed he has when he starts taking off on the ground. A true nice dual threat quarterback here. The system, certainly an adjustment. Like I said, with the Ohio State, I think that's more of a, exaggerated issue, but I think Tennessee as well, the system adjustment, the scheme change will be big. But a guy like Brian Day,
on quarterback, Daniel Jones seems to be
the future in New York, right? But it certainly doesn't hurt to have a solid, very strong backup who's kind of taking his time, recovering from the ACL, learning the playbook, and could be a starter in the future. I think this would be a great pick for the Giants. They don't really gamble on quarterbacks like this, but I think this is the opportunity to do so. This new regime in New York has the opportunity here to kind of create a new mold for themselves. I think this will be a first, interesting pick and kind of making that step towards creating a new identity for the New York Giants.
I think this is a win-win situation for everybody. Hooker gets to come in, recover from that ACL. I think he'd be a big junkie in the film room, and I think he'd help push Daniel Jones because he's a great teammate. You've seen the relationship he has with his backup at Tennessee and Joe Milton. That certainly seems like it's going to benefit that guy who transferred over from Michigan. So I certainly think this would help Daniel Jones as well. Hooker in multiple different ways would be a big contribution to this team. And I think Brian Dable would benefit by having a young quarterback he can kind of work with, especially with Daniel Jones still being kind of iffy. But I think he'll be back on a 2 to 3 year deal. Next up, 154, the Seattle Seahawks, Jaren Hall. Him and Jake Haener are two of my favorite, most underrated prospects at quarterback in this draft. Hall did not look good at all in Mobile, really seemed overwhelmed. But the tape is still the tape, Nick. This is a guy that really throws it at his wide receiver's hands, has a strong arm with zip, rarely underthrows a receiver. He's also an elusive runner. He can throw on the run with precision. He's not exactly the best under pressure. He throws off his back foot a good bit. Not much of a creator when things break down. I know there's a handful of clips out there where he kind of, improvises quite well. But for the most part, this is not much of a creator. Durability is a bit of an issue, too. He's not much of a rhythm passer, kind of needs to speed up some timing. But Jaren Hall, I absolutely love watching his tape coming into the year. This is a guy that gives his wide receivers a chance in one-on-one situations. Like, he always throws the ball to where his pass catchers can come down with it. I think this is a guy that has great arm strength, good speed, rarely underthrows again, like I said. This is a guy that I'm very impressed by when you watch his tape. Very interested to see what happens in the NFL. And, day one backup for him as well. I think a Jordan Love type role with Seattle would be what goes down. Geno Smith, phenomenal Pro Bowl type year, which was certainly unexpected. I think this is a guy that can come in and be a backup for 3 or more years if they need him to be, and play sporadic if they need him to. And I think when it's time for him to step into a starting role, he'd be prepared.
This is a great fit for the Seattle Seahawks. Jaren Hall pulled out of the Senior Bowl, didn't play in the game, only practiced. Not a great practice. I wasn't really impressed with what I saw in person. But I think this is a talented quarterback. BYU was fun to watch this year, and certainly Hall played a part in that. Throws it right to his wide receiver's hands. They had a creative, high-paced offense. They scored some points here and there. Solid point-scoring team. He throws in the run with precision, elusive in the pocket. Gets a little happy feet sometimes. Sometimes the back foot, isn't the greatest thing. Throwing off the back foot, not ideal. But he's a really talented quarterback. I think he's a very underrated quarterback.
Hall, I think he's got potential to be a good backup.
Learn the system. 6'1", 205. I think this, not a terrible size there at all. I think he's got some time to sit back, learn the playbook, get comfortable in the system. It could be a future starter in Seattle. And this is a fun, exciting quarterback that, taking him at 154, this is great value, right? You might as well grab a quarterback like this when you can. I think this is a good pick for Seahawks.
Looking at 161, the Minnesota Vikings, they take off Stetson Bennett from the draft board from Georgia. Nick, I'm not really sure how to feel about Bennett because I think this was the projection to begin with him. And then you see how a guy his age, who's 25, declined a Senior Bowl invite. And instead of being in Mobile that Sunday, he got arrested for, public intoxication. That is certainly something that at first I didn't think would affect him much. But then when I kind of heard the details, it kind of opened my mind a little bit. That doesn't make a lot of sense at all because Hendon Hooker was in Mobile. He wasn't practicing, himself, but he still impressed a lot of teams with his interviews. Horrible look for Stetson Bennett, but looking at him as just a player, this is a guy that does have some good mobility. Occasionally showcases toughness in the pocket, has a quick release. Of course, he has that experience factor going for him. Some good accuracy when he stands tall in the pocket. Short to intermediate distributor. Less than stellar arm talent, though, for him. He struggles with laying the football as well. Not exactly a tight window thrower. And I think the biggest, negative for me is he lacks poise under pressure. He has a late trigger at times. But, playing in this Georgia system, obviously an elite defense. Todd Monken, an elite play caller, the offensive line, another part of the football team that's just flat out elite. This is a guy that I feel like if you had to put on a different team would not be as good. And I think a lot of people are have iffy takes on Stetson Bennett because they can't really process that he played on the best situation possible. And yes, he's obviously a very good football player, but how does he translate as a prospect? I think all the things I've said as negatives are legit concerns. And again, just when he plays under pressure, he just does not seem very confident. And in the NFL, it's not going to be, all that, it's not going to be that simple, not that easy. So, how do you feel about Bennett, Nick? Because I do think this guy has long-term potential as a backup to be a potential game manager, especially in Minnesota. But again, the negatives are some big-time concerns.
I struggle a lot with Stetson Bennett here. We saw this in the past with Dak Prescott, who got arrested prior to the draft and really tanked his stock, ends up in the 4th round, right? I think Stetson Bennett deserved to fall down to this range, right? The arrest is completely concerning, right? That is not a good look. And skipping the Senior Bowl is also a terrible look. So those two together, it's just the hits keep adding up here for Bennett. I don't really think it's a good look at all. He played on the best team in the nation, certainly was, had a lot of talent around him, which certainly helped, right? He's good in the pocket, good mobility, great field vision, high football IQ, but I think that this is a guy that's just going to struggle to adjust to the next level, right? When you take that step from playing with the best team in the nation, with the best 5-star recruits to a team in the NFL that sometimes the talent may not be there, it's definitely a tough kind of draw, right? I think this is a guy that's a good backup game manager. Minnesota, that's a good fit. I just think that people saying he should be in the 3rd round, even the 3rd, 4th, 2nd round, things like that, it's just far too high for a guy like Stetson Bennett. I don't think he will rise at all. I really think that he's going to be a late round draft pick, but he has potential to develop and be a future backup and maybe find himself a starting role at some point.
He does have a great. The film is pretty good at Georgia, right?
It's tough to judge Stetson Bennett. It is one of the hardest players to grade. I think we've graded in the last couple of years. One of the hardest players to grade top to bottom because there's so many negatives and so many positives and there's so many contributing factors across the board. It's really tough to get a good read on a guy like Bennett.
I think Jake Fromm might be an accurate comparison. I know a lot of people are using Aaron Murray and AJ McCarron, but I think as a former, the guy that was at Georgia before him, and Jake Fromm, he was a guy that a lot of people were interested to see at this combine, and he completely tanked his stock. He did not have a good effort in Indianapolis. Bennett, he's obviously going to have to do the same thing. And we're all very curious to see how he does with a variety of players, not all these 5 stars that are, wide open and, having 4 running backs that all average over 5 yards per carry. So, what are your expectations for him at the combine, Nick? Because I know a lot of people are going to be looking into that, myself included.
I think he'll have a solid combine. I think there's a potential here to get some good practice, show off some skills. You're right. The talent drop, certainly be playing with players that are necessarily not the 5 stars he used to, will certainly maybe impact a little bit. But I think he has a good chance here to perform at the combine, potentially move his stock a little bit. I think I would like to see a good week out of him. I think it's certainly possibly it's a good week, but it's also possibly because it has a bad showing and tanks his stock even more. It's already towards the bottom where it should be.
Looking at the 7th round here, Tennessee Titans, I have them taking an Aidan O'Connell out of Purdue. This is a guy that, certainly thrived in the air raid system. He's a rhythm thrower. I think he has a handful of characteristics, though, that might fit in here with Tennessee, like that fast release, good ball placement in the short to intermediate range. It seems really fit the scheme, Nick, because they love to run the ball. Derrick Henry, they feed him like, something else. And a lot of play action, a lot of, same concepts that are in the air raid, a lot of underneath stuff. He has great football IQ. He really understands zone coverage. Some of the negatives, though, are the big reason why he's going to be at the bottom of the draft. Not much mobility. Arm strength isn't great. Bit of a turnover-prone guy, and he does not have great downfield control, and he's just not good one bit under pressure, especially when he has to, make off-schedule plays. The Purdue offense really faltered when he had to do that. This is a 2-time second-team All-Big Ten quarterback, which that's a massive accomplishment in that because C.J. Stroud, obviously a first-teamer back-to-back years. So you have to beat out some really talented guys. I think that he's going to battle for the roster spot with Tennessee. Potentially might even end up on the practice squad. Maybe there as a number 3 quarterback. He may be even pushing Malik Willis. I don't see that, but I do think this is a guy that will somehow make the final 53 roster if he does end up in Tennessee, just because I do think he's a bit of a scheme fit here.
Yeah, I think this is a good scheme fit. Nice pick here for the Titans. Certainly there are a lot of negatives, right? The mobility, the arm strength, tad bit turnover prone, not great at downfield. Certainly the negatives are there, right? But I think there are some positives. Look at, Kyle, 6'3", 210, good size, you know, all Big Ten two times, right? Not bad at all. Good throwing pace, high football IQ, understands defenses really well, good reads on the field. I think this is a quarterback that you might as well take a pick here at 231. I think this is a guy that's got potential to be involved in the future. The Titans, their quarterback future is certainly up in the air at this point. I think O'Connell certainly can learn the playbook over a few years and be an impact backup in the future for the Tennessee Titans.
I do think the Titans are a team to watch that could potentially make a splash on night one of the draft and trade up for one of those better quarterbacks. And then looking at 235 late in the 7th round, Green Bay Packers, Nick, you have him taking Max Duggan. His role here is you think he's going to fight for a spot as number 3 quarterback, and you think long-term he might be a guy that can do something with. I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback regardless of what happens with Aaron Rodgers. If he departs or if he stays. If he does depart, I do think they're going to bring in a veteran to back up Jordan Love. This is a guy, though, he's tough. He has a sturdy frame. He's a gamer as a runner. Really took off this past year under Garrett Riley and Sonny Dykes as a passer. He's an athletic player all around. Good intermediate accuracy. Plays with a lot of confidence as well. That's certainly a negative, though, too. He's a reckless player, which in college you kind of expect that. Guys won't take hits. It's obviously something I think it can be easily fixed. Bad feet, though, very shaky mechanics. That touch and accuracy is very inconsistent. Often scares down receivers, too. That leads to bad interceptions. This is the guy, though, that really took off this year. Davey O'Brien Award winner, Heisman finalist, second-team All-American. Very happy to see Max Duggan get this much success, but I'm not sure if he translates to the next level very well. Why do you think he'll end up in Green Bay?
It's a pick that makes sense to me personally. There's a lot of uncertainty with Aaron Rodgers. Certainly, it's all speculation, but I think the Green Bay Packers here in the 7th round could take a gamble on a guy like Max Duggan, right? It certainly helps to have a deep quarterback room. Jordan Love is the future in Green Bay. We don't know when that future starts, but he is the future. But why not have a guy like Duggan sit on the bench and learn the playbook, right? Duggan, I think, is a very excited quarterback, very talented. I obviously saw that at TCU this year. 6'2", 210. I love what he can do in the pocket. Good athletic runner, confident downfield, good accuracy. I think this would be a great pick for Green Bay personally because you can't have too much talent in the quarterback room. You can never have too much talent in the quarterback room. I think get a guy like Duggan in there, have him learn the 7, fight spot as QB3 for now, potentially long-term develop as a backup or even a starter in the future. I think Duggan's a young guy with a whole lot of potential.
I think you should take a gamble here and grab a guy in the 7th round.
There's not much talent more you're going to do in the 7th round. You might as well make the pick here, in my opinion. I think this makes a whole lot of sense for the Green Bay Packers. There's a lot of uncertainty in Green Bay right now, but get a young guy who's got a fighting spirit, a super competitive kid, very athletic, and a lot of upside. I think this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, sold to me. Seems like a very good observation. And if it's in the 7th round, why not pull the trigger? It's going to be it for today's episode. Guys, Nick, appreciate you joining me. This was a fun one.
Yeah, I'm absolutely excited to see where these quarterbacks end up. Got a good read on some of these guys in Mobile this past weekend. Some of these guys are going to rise. Some of these guys are going to fall. It's exciting to see how they test the combine.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time. Again, go check out our good friends over at the